What's up? I'm Pip. Let's upgrade the Scrappy Survivors Precon deck. I'm gonna give you 10, 20, 50, and $100 options. Let's talk about my philosophy surrounding Commander first before we dive in. I like to build fun, interactive decks that don't try and combo off, and that have very few tutors in them. I'm looking for fun, interactive games that we still end up winning. You can find all the deck lists in the description below. They're over on Moxfield, which is a great site for building decks. You can pretty easily add them all to your cart directly from the website. Check them out. Dog Me Ever Loyal is going to be our commander today, and he's a very good boy. So I'm taking a pretty unique approach to building this deck. I'm removing all the enchantment synergies and replacing it with equipment synergies. This deck is going to be very low to the ground with an extremely cheap curve. I'm going to be removing a lot of cards that seem like they're good value and a good fit, but they're just a little too expensive. Our plan here is to draw a bunch of cards, create a lot of junk tokens, which are going to let us impulse draw, and cast a metric load of creatures. We're going to be going extremely wide, attacking every turn and having a bunch of cards that are allowing us to have multiple combat steps. You're not going to make very many friends with this deck because you need to attack each player to create that junk token each turn. This deck puts everything on the table as often as it can, which means it's pretty susceptible to board wipes and sweepers. We're going to combat that by drawing a ton of cards and having a bunch of junk tokens laying around. So even after a board wipe, we're going to vomit our hand back up and just keep going. Let's take a look and see what we got. Hexplate Wallbreaker. I'm going to be adding just about every 4 Mirrodin card I can find. These cards are multi-purpose. They're going to create a creature and leave an equipment around when the creature dies. This one's going to give us a second combat step each turn the creature is able to attack. And we're going to be able to throw that on any creature after it's dealt with. Attack early, attack often. Regal Bunnycorn. Aww, he's pretty cute. We're going to be going so wide and creating so many pieces of cardboard in this deck. Regal Bunnycorn is going to get huge. Lizard Blade. Pretty self-explanatory here. It's a 1/1 double striker for 2, which is great. And you can move that double strike around if you let it. And if this dies, it goes to our graveyard and we have a bunch of ways to recur. Chishiro the Shattered Blade. This is going to help us get even wider than we normally would. And each equipped creature is going to grow each turn. Pitseal Malamute Exemplar. This is going to help prevent any tricky stuff during our turn. And draw some more cards. Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. So for every equipment we attach to this guy, we're probably going to deal an extra 3 damage each turn. That can add up pretty quickly. Hex Gold Hoverwings. This one's a little pricey for what it does, but it is giving us a creature and an equipment for 4 mana, and it's going to +1/+0 all of our equipped creatures. Blade Graft Aspirant. This is going to help us cycle through our deck a little quicker, and we can tron it up if that menace is relevant to us. Dan Lewis. This is a really fun one with all of our junk tokens. We're going to be able to turn those into extra damage. Blade Hold War Whip. This is one of the more powerful equipments in the deck. For 3 mana, we're getting a 2/2 double strike, and our equip abilities are all going to be cheaper. It's going to be a little expensive to move around later in the game, but we have quite a few ways to cheat that. Mirror Style Master. I haven't seen this card in any other versions of this deck, and I think it's really good. So for 6 mana, which is very pricey, we're going to be backing up, which means putting a 1/1 counter on a creature, and it's going to gain all the abilities below the backup. Whenever this creature attacks, for each attacking modified creature you control, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature. Exile those tokens at end of turn. We're probably pretty far into the game when we cast this, which means we're going to have a wide board. If we're able to pair this with a double attack turn, it's going to be insane. Kemba's Banner. Another 4 Mirrodin equipment. This one's a little costly to cast, but it should be huge, and we can move it around. Batterbone. It's just a nice cheap creature that leaves behind an equipment. Although it's a little expensive to equip, like I said, we should be able to cheat it around. Emba Ka Regent. The more things we equip to this, the wider our board's going to get each turn. Reborn Defenses. This is one of the few cards that's going to help protect us from board wipes and create a few more tokens. Make a Stand. Same thing, protect us from board wipes, and it's going to pump the team if we need to finish somebody off. Fathom Fleet Swordjack. This is just going to do a boatload of direct damage on attack, and it has some recursion later in the game for a bunch of added damage. Boundary Inspector. This is going to help us cycle through our deck pretty quickly off of all those draw cards and junk tokens. Rabbit Battery. I know this card looks pretty low impact, but being able to shift around that haste ability should come in handy later in the game. Plus, it'll help us get some early triggers from our commander. Togo Goblin Weaponsmith. So on landfall, we're going to create more equipment that are basically 2 mana and tap to deal 2 damage to any target. This has multiple synergies in our deck. It's going to help us go even wider with more material on the board, and it's going to give us some direct damage options if we stall out. Kimba, Ka Enduring. It's going to anthem all of our equipped creatures, and it can generate some tokens if we need to later. Rayav, Master Smith. Most of our creatures are going to be equipped, so this should help us do a ton of damage. Astor, Bearer of Blades. We're going to draw a card here and be able to cheat our equipment around much cheaper. Talisman of Unity, Talisman of Conviction, and Talisman of Impulse. Just adding a few more rocks here so that we can ramp easier. We're opting to use rocks here as our ramp options because they leave material on the board, which we have other synergies for. Cloud Steel Kieran. So another equipment and creature in one, plus this one has some fun text. You can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game if we equip this. Cole, the Forge Master. So whenever a non-token creature that's equipped dies, we get to return it to our hand, and tokens that are equipped get +1/+1. Not bad for 2 mana. Heavenly Blade Master. This one's more of a game ender, but when we play it, we can basically equip everything to it and anthem the rest of our team for a bunch. Response and Resurgence. We're probably not going to play the left side of this card unless we're in a real pinch, but the right side is going to give us another combat phase for 5 mana. Danitha Capuchin, Paragon. This is going to reduce the cost of all of our equipment spells, so we can cycle through those cards much quicker. Danitha New Benelia's Light. This is going to give us some recursion, which is going to help us recover after a board wipe or removal. Akiri, Fearless Voyager. Here we're going to get some more card draw and be able to protect our equipped creatures. Port Razor. If this is allowed to attack, potentially having up to 3 combat phases in a single turn. Woo! That's spicy. Limmerlens. Another 4 Mirrodin equipment, and this one's pretty cheap. It's a 2/2 for 2, and gives us more card draw. SRAM, Senior Edificer. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Later in the game, we should be able to chain this for a few extra cards every single turn. Boros Signet, Grol's Signet, Selesnia's Signet. Like I said before, we're adding a few more rocks here. We're choosing artifacts because it helps us go wide, and has some synergies with some of the other cards in our deck. Nettle Cyst. This thing should be absolutely huge with our game plan. Alright, I'm gonna hit pause real quick just to ask you to smash that like and subscribe button. Looking at the data over on my supercomputer, I can see that only 1% of you nerds who watch my videos are subscribed. Now, I'm gonna have to sell my kidneys if I don't get about, 32% of you guys to subscribe to my channel. Alright, back to the video. Alright, let's move on to the $20 upgrades. Komainu Battle Armor. So this is a 2/2 menace. And if it deals combat damage to a player, all of their creatures are goated next turn. The best defense is a good offense. Lion Sash. This should grow pretty fast, and it's going to give you some options if anyone at the table is playing some graveyard recursion. Thousand Moon Smithy. With how wide we're going, this thing's just going to be spitting out huge creatures every single turn. And once you turn it into a land, it's going to survive board wipes. Tanuki Transplanter. This is just going to give us some extra mana. So for those turns where we're cycling through a bunch of cards and vomiting out our hand, we should have plenty of gas. Nahiri, Forged in Fury. She should be much cheaper to play. I'd imagine most of the time 2 mana. And she's going to give us a bunch of impulse draws with the ability to cast equipment for free off of them. Kellen the Fey-Blooded. I know I say I don't like to add tutor effects, and I don't add many, but this one has it built in, and you're just finding an equipment, not a win condition. This is another creature. The more equipment we attach to it, the bigger it's going to make the rest of our team. Alright, $50 version, let's go! Bazan, Revered Bladesmith. Although we're not playing his hammer in this version of the deck, his ability to tap down your opponent's creatures is going to ensure you're going to get through and do a bunch of damage. I bet 9 times out of 10 you're going to have more creatures than all of your opponents, and you're going to be able to tap all of them down. Rose, Cutthroat Raider. This one is super fun and from one of the other Fallout precons. Now we have the potential of making 6 junk tokens per turn if we attack each opponent, and we're going to get a little bit of mana each time we sack one to help us snowball. Fury of the Horde. So here's another double combat card, and this one we could potentially cast for free. Pretty good. Koski, Bearer of Secrets. I would have put this in the cheaper versions of the deck if it weren't so expensive, but this card really makes the deck sing. For each creature that's getting through, which could be quite a few each turn, we're going to draw a card. And like I said, we should have 7 cards in our hand most of the time. This card's really going to keep the ball rolling. Savage Beating. What a great name for a card. This one's going to be another double combat spell, and potentially give all of our creatures double strike. That'll end the game quick. Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. This card is a little bit pricey to buy, but if you have one, or can afford one, I'd really recommend it. Most of the time it's going to give our creatures Vigilance and Trample. and occasionally even double strike. We're going to be adding some of the cheaper untapped dual lands like Razor Verge Thicket, Copperline Gorge, Battlefield Forge, Brushland, and Carclucent Forest. Whew, alright, we made it. We're at the $100 upgrades. Combat Celebrant. Here's another double combat card. This one's a little cheaper to cast than some of the others, but it does have to survive to your next turn. Aurelia the War Leader. You know her, you love her, you want more double combat cards? Well, here you go. Bitterthorn, Nissa's Animus. I like this card a lot in this deck, but it's pretty pricey, so if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Kodama of the West Tree. This may be the best card in this deck, but it's also one of the most expensive. You're gonna be able to pull out a bunch of extra land when this attacks. With how aggressive this deck is, it's important to have as many lands as we can coming in and play untapped, which is why I'm adding some of these slow lands. Rockfall Vale and Overgrown Farmland. I'll also be adding all the untapped double-face lands. Branch Loft Pathway, Crag Crown Pathway, and Needle Verge Pathway. So that's it for the $100 deck. Here's a few honorable mentions if you want to switch cards out. There's a bunch of cards that do the same thing as other cards in this deck at different price points and different mana values. Hammer of Nazahan, Embercleave, Armored Skyhunter, Relentless Assault, Forge Anew, and Arden the Intrepid. I also like Hellkite Tyrant in this deck, which has a cool alternate win condition, which may actually be pretty easy for us. Although, as soon as you slam this bad boy, everyone's going to try and kill you or it. Alright, let's talk about the cards that are coming out. I'm going to break them down into 4 categories. Bad, meh, okay, and pretty good. If you want to see exactly what I remove in each version, check down in the description and you can take a look at my mods field. I have all the deck lists there, and they should be pretty easy to add them to a card and mix and match. Alright, let's start with the bad category. Crimson Caravaneer. This card's just a little too slow for what we're trying to do. The additional junk tokens are nice, but you need to equip this thing to have it do what we're actually trying to do. 3-Dog Galaxy News DJ. We're not going the enchantment route in this version of the deck, so this doesn't make the cut. Duchess Wayward Tavern Keep. Not exactly on plan, and too slow for what we're trying to do. Big Horner Rancher. The extra mana would be nice, but this costs 5 mana to cast. Preston Garvey Minuteman. I like this card a lot, and I'm trying to brainstorm a commander deck based on this one, but it doesn't fit into what we're trying to do here. Megaton's Fate. Too expensive and not on theme. Single Combat. This card is pretty cool, but I don't think we want any board wipes in this deck. Valorous Stance. We're just going to replace this with cards that give the whole team indestructible instead of just one. Breakdown. There's better options for artifact and enchantment removal. Plus, we're just swinging for the fences here. We're not too worried about destroying other people's cards. Fire Shrieker. Too expensive and doesn't create a body. We're opting to remove most of our equipment that doesn't come with a body. Perception Bobblehead and Agility Bobblehead. We're just replacing these with cheaper mana rocks. Brass Knuckles. Too expensive, too slow. Abundant Growth. We don't really need the fixing here. The card draw's okay, but it's not particularly on theme. Sticky Fingers. Like I said, we're opting for equipment over enchantments, so most of the enchantments are coming out. Idolized. Like I just said, most of the enchantments are coming out. We want to be attacking with most everything we have to trigger our command, not just one creature. Vault 21. House Gambit. The payoff for this card isn't even that great. I don't know why we would play it. Acquired Mutation. Not on theme. See ya. Squirrel Nest. This one's pretty cool, but I think it's a little too slow. Strong Back. Not really on theme. And like I said, we're taking out all the enchantments and replacing them with equipment. On to the M category. Kate Caged Brawler. This card's alright because it's indestructible when it attacks, and it gives us some card draw, but I think there's better options. Mr. Gutsy. Hello, Mr. Gutsy. This thing's alright. It should grow pretty quickly in our deck, but I think there's better options. Veronica Dissident Scribe. This gives us some card draw, and if you don't put some of the other card draw cards in there, I could see leaving this in there. Commander Sophia de Guerre. This is a pretty good card, but we're just swinging for the fences here, so I'm going to take out most of our removal. Blasphemous Act. 95% of the time, we're not going to want a board wipe to go off. It might be an okay plan to leave a board wipe in your deck in case you fall behind, but let's just stick to plan A. Chaos Warp. Like I said, I'm taking out most of the removal in this deck so that we can just swing for the fences. If you're going to leave any in, this is a decent one. Explorer's Scope. There's better equipment that comes with bodies, but this one helps you ramp sometimes. Pip-Boy 3000. I know this is an expensive card and pretty powerful, but it's a little too slow for what we're trying to do in this deck. I do like it though. Behemoth Sledge. Trample and Lifelink would fit in well to this deck, but this is a little too expensive. Champion's Helm. You could leave this in if you feel like protecting some of your high-profile creatures, but it doesn't come with a body, which is what we're really trying to do. Animal Friend. This thing could get pretty big pretty quickly in this deck, but it's a little too cute. It doesn't have enough synergy. Almost Perfect. Not enough synergy, but not a bad card. Fertile Ground. We're opting for mana rocks over enchantments here, but this sorta does the same thing. Well Rested. This would give you some card draw next turn and make the creature a little bigger. There's certainly better options. Ash Barrens. This would thin our deck and find a basic, but I'd rather replace it with an untapped duel. Evolving Wilds. I'd rather replace it with an untapped duel. Terramorphic Expanse. I'd rather replace it with an untapped duel. Junktown. I want to limit the number of colorless lands we have in this deck. We have plenty of other cards that are doing the same thing for cheaper. Roadside Reliquary. This card's alright, but with us removing all the enchantments that we are, chances of us drawing 2 cards off of this are pretty low. Temple of the False God. We're not really ramping as often as we're putting out mana rocks early, so later in the game, we can rely on this being 2 mana, but early game, if we draw this at the wrong time, we're really gonna get stuck, which we don't have time to do if we're the aggressive deck at the table. On to the OK cards. Gunner Conscript. A 2-2 for 2 with trample with some upside and equipment synergies isn't bad in this deck. Kass, Hand of Vengeance. This is just gonna let us move around some of our equipment when it dies. I don't know. That's alright. Super Mutant Scavenger. We have cheaper recursion effects, but this one's not terrible. Leave it in if you don't play any of the others. Path the Exile. This is great removal for 1 mana, but like I said, we're swinging for the fences here, and I'm taking out most of the removal. Basilisk Collar. We should be bigger than most of the creatures early, and the lifelink's kind of irrelevant for us. Battle Forged Axe. I like that this can create a bunch of copies of itself, but it's a little slow for what we're doing. I'd be interested in testing it and see how well it plays out though. Junk Jet. This card can end somebody real quick, but the more blockers someone has and able to chump the junk jetted creature, the less good this becomes. Silver Shroud Costume. This will help us protect one of our creatures and make it unblockable. We could leave this in as easily as we're taking it out. Buried Ruins. Like I said, we don't want too many colorless lands in here, but the effect on this one is pretty good if we're not playing that many recursion cards in our deck. Canopy Vista, Cinderglade, and Scavenger Grounds. We're not playing that many basics in the deck, so I could see these coming into play tapped most of the time, which is not what we're looking to do. Temple of Abandon, Temple of Plenty, and Temple of Triumph. Like I said, we want most of our lands to come into play untapped since we're going to be the aggressor, but these aren't terrible. If you don't have the other duels, leave them in. On to pretty good. These were ones that were tough cuts for me, and I could see leaving them in there in most iterations of the deck. Masterwork of Ingenuity. For 1 mana, you're going to copy your best equipment. This is pretty good, but it doesn't work on its own. Ian the Reckless. This is a nice cheap card that can do a bunch of damage, and we're not too worried about our health total. Brotherhood Outcast. I like this for cheap recursion, but there's a few better options that I've included in my versions. If you don't play those, certainly play this. Codsworth, Handy Helper. This helps protect your commander and ramps you a little bit. At 3 mana though, it's a little bit slow. Moira Brown, Guide Author. I like that this card's going to create you a bunch of extra equipment cards that we have synergies for. It's going to be a little slow though. Vault 101, Happy Birthday! Creating a bunch of tokens for us and bringing some cards back into play. I like this card, but it's not an equipment itself, so that's why I cut it. Mantle of the Ancients. Later in the game, this card's going to be really good, but I think there's going to be plenty of scenarios where we don't have enough cards in our graveyard to really get full value here. But if you slam this after a couple board wipe, and your living weapons are dead, and your reconfigure creatures are dead, you can get a lot of value from this card. Scattered Groves and Sheltered Thicket. I like these cycle lands because they give us options if we draw them late game and we already have enough land. But I think 95% of the time, I think I'd rather just have an untapped tool. I know I decided to take a pretty off-the-beaten-path approach to this one. Did you like it? Am I an idiot? Let me know down in the comments. What did I forget? What would you add? What are some of your favorite equipment synergy cards? Alright, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.